Hello, everyone, and welcome to our developer chat here on the Vonage Developer YouTube channel. My name is Alex. I am a developer advocate at Vonage, and I'm joined with...
I am Jeremy, and I'm also a developer advocate at Vonage.
I'm Benjamin Aronov. I am, you might guess it, developer advocate. But unlike these two who specialize in video, I'm more on the written content.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Crump, and I am a manager in the developer relations team. And these are some of the great folks that I have on that team, providing all kinds of content, tutorials, and so much more.
Yes. And so we're all actually in New York City right now, and we thought this would be the perfect time for us to sit down and talk about one of the biggest topics in tech, AI. So we want to talk about things like, how we use it personally, how it's changing software development, and how Vonage is evolving alongside AI. So let's get into that. Okay, so the first question is, when it comes to general use of AI, like which LLM or chatbot do you tend to go to first? Like there's ChatGPT, there's Claude, there's Gemini, there's all these different options, right? So if you just had a general question, what do you tend to go to first and why?
I guess I'll kick off the topic here or the conversation here with I am still in the open AI camp, ChatGPT, but I do use Anthropic's Sonnet as my backend there. And the reason that I'm still using that is that I absolutely believe that for a lot of my kind of maybe less coding, but more kind of managerial work, it has helped me out tremendously, especially on terms of speed.
Yeah. If you get hooked early, it's hard to change. So I actually still, day to day, I go to ChatGPT. And then for coding stuff, I'm probably one of the few people, well, maybe not that few, but a small group who has stuck by Windsurf. I do use Claude Code more and more recently, but I do love still like the ability with Windsurf or Cursor switch out models. And so Windsurf was great early on. I know like momentum has moved away from there, but again, old habits die hard.
Yeah. First of all, I just love that there's so much choice in tooling and in models. I bounce, practically speaking, between ChatGPT and Claude Code a lot. So mainly those two, but theoretically, I want to remain agnostic, and so I'll try to go to Gemini and any of the other niche toolings or models just to make sure that I'm constantly trying them all out.
Yeah. ChatGPT is my go-to for one specific reason, and it started early on. It was because I like to talk to my phone a lot.
The conversation
exactly.
is so good.
It's really good on ChatGPT, and it wasn't great on Claude.
It's still not.
Exactly. Yeah, if I use Claude, I'll use like Whisper Flow, but it's just an extra step that I don't necessarily love to go through. With that said, ChatGPT is great, but there's a ton of great things out, and I think with that, I need to explore a little bit more. But kind of like you, like I got into ChatGPT early, and I just kind of stuck there. Just out of muscle memory.
I also use Glean. It's the main reason that I use that is 100% because I can put confidential data into it. We have an enterprise, obviously, contract there where we can upload documents and Excel sheets, and it can go through our org charts and things like that to help us become just a little bit better. And actually, I'm liking that right now to especially help speed up some managerial tasks.
As a follow-up, what's one thing that AI helps you with every week? It can be work, personal, but just...
What does it not help you with?
Yeah, exactly.
I remember when, it was pretty shortly after, the OpenAI hype train took off, and one of our friend of a friend, we were making fun of him because it seemed so sad at the time. But he had just gotten engaged or maybe married even at the time, and it was around Valentine's Day. And he was one of the first ones I remember. He's just started having, let's just say, he and his partner they have real rambunctious conversations, and he realized, oh, I can just outsource this. And he was just outsourcing it, getting himself out of fights with the ChatGPT. And I remember at the time we were all like, oh my God, that's so horrible and terrible. And
So now this is something you do every week.
well, yeah, first I gotta get a girlfriend, but yeah, but maybe once I get maybe ChatGPT can help me with that.
There you go.
But yeah, no, to the point, what I meant to say was, a couple of years ago, it seemed crazy. It was like, oh, you would use AI for very specific, work related or coding or whatever, and now it's really ubiquitous. It's just like every time I start thinking, I remember there was coming up in the 2000s when there was researchers like psychologists where they realized that people, instead of so you would ask someone a question, and instead of thinking that the answer, our generation, we would think, what would we put into Google?
Yeah.
And now you just think, oh, well, I would just ask the question to ChatGPT. How would I ask the question to ChatGPT?
Yeah.
And I see in myself, it's like kind of scary.
Sure.
You're not really even thinking, what am I doing? You're just like, how quickly can I get to an LLM?
And it's made obvious whenever you're in a situation where you don't have your phone or you don't have internet, and those things come to mind. You're like, oh, I can't ask right now. Oh, I can't ask right now.
Yeah.
Well, for myself, there's two primary ones. One of them, maybe I shouldn't be admitting it here on the podcast, but it is that I use it for emails. I had this conversation a little while ago with Jeremy about how sometimes I will get gigantic email threads that has a forward. Y'all have all seen those before. I might use ChatGPT to take a look at all of that, or Glean or whatever, and then go ahead and stub out a response for it. And then, of course, before I send anything, I will make a few edits. So I typically use it to get me about 85% there responding to an email, and then I just fill in the final touches. And the other thing that I would say that I use it for is for extensive research. Every single week, there might be something that I'm looking up based off of a competitor, or just other documentations or Gartner or things of that nature, publications that come out, and I want it to crunch maybe some numbers. I want it to give me summaries, and that's primarily the two things. And it's interesting is that I even used it on the way over here today, because I missed a couple of meetings, and in those meetings they were using Gemini, and so it gave me a breakdown on who was assigned what responsibility. So really, yeah, just like Benjamin said, just about in every way it's helping me.
Yeah. As someone that works from home and lives alone, I think I talk to ChatGPT more than I talk to an actual person these days, which is scary. But yeah, I use AI for pretty much everything now, but I think one of my more fun ways of using AI is, or ChatGPT specifically, is I don't know if you guys watch Chopped, the cooking show.
No.
But it's basically a show where it's like you have a certain amount of ingredients and you have to like make a meal based on those ingredients. And I'll tell ChatGPT, I'm like, okay, I have bananas, I have oatmeal, I have all these ingredients. Like, what can I make with this in the next 30 minutes? So yeah, it can be used for everything as silly as like, what do I make for dinner, or what do I have for breakfast, and
Yes.
what can I research, or like how do I get the best information?
Well, like Benjamin said, it's kind of like, what can you not use it for?
Exactly.
Use it for everything.
Yeah.
100 technical examples came to mind, but I wanted to share a couple that are non-technical. One is I love being able to say, hey, my boys and I just watched this movie and we liked it. Can you give me 5 recommendations that are like that? And even be able to say, are there any parts of that movie that aren't appropriate for kids or something? So that's really helpful.
Yes.
Another one is I do a lot of like builder projects at home, and I love being able to say, hey, can I use this adhesive or this cleaning product on this kind of plastic or this material, and no looking up spec sheets and stuff like that. It can just tell you, no, that's not going to work. It's going to melt it or whatever.
Yep. Cool. So another question I have for you guys is, how has AI changed your day-to-day life as a developer advocate? What tasks do you rely on it for now? I know you kind of mentioned that a little bit, but are there any other, especially when it comes to videos and blog posts, are there any aspects about it that has like completely changed how you go about creating content?
Completely changed every aspect.
Yeah. Especially being more on the written content side, obviously AI that's the
It's
domain
niche.
of AI.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right. Everything with the
Large
words.
language models.
Exactly, and so much better than humans. I mean, not to toot my
We
own horn.
understand. We understand.
They're okay. They're okay. Listen, I would put my writing up there with any AI model, but no. I think I would say that it was good. I think I realized really early on just how powerful these tools were for especially for developer advocacy, because it's the combination of these tools are really good at coding and they're really good at words, and how much of my job is really annoying moving words around.
Yeah.
And especially so very quickly early on, I started building out some tools for us in our team to try and make our team a lot more efficient. One of the worst parts was always doing blog post reviews, and being in a team where we have a sizable amount of writers within our team and outside of our team. So we have a pretty, Vonage is a really great place to work, but we are a corporation, and so we have a lot of rules that we have to follow, and not everybody's always on top of all those rules. AI is really good with rules,
Yep.
and so I think people really liked. It really helped speed along the process of, hey, I don't have to go look up all the rules, check all the blog posts against them. I can just dump it onto AI. And what used to be take a lot of days back and forth between copywriters and going through the editing process was just send it to AI. Okay, it did the checklist, have a human read through it, and now our review process for a couple of years now went from being days or weeks to realistically when somebody finishes a blog post, it should be reviewed with both in the same day.
Yeah.
And just to add on to that, another project that I had been taking a look at before I actually came to lovely New York City was more along the lines of accessibility and making sure that our blog would be something that could be read by all. And what I'm more specifically referring to is images and the alt text. Now, for those of you that may or may not be familiar, there's multiple different types of text that can be either auto-generated or whatever for that. What we have planned to do is to make sure that there is English for the deaf and the hard of hearing, and they're very descriptive about what's inside of the image. And I worked with our development manager, and both of us had started playing with some tests of taking some images and given a full description, whereas in the past, especially with myself, when I would maybe manually write that text myself. And I will be honest, at the end of a blog post, that is sort of that extra thing to do that I may not really want to do, and I want to get it published. Now, with the use of this AI, we can have very good descriptions for those that are deaf or hard of hearing.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say Michael, that's one of the, I even now take it for granted, but it's, you would have to write a alt text about an image, and you just wrote a very long blog post. You had to go through the process, getting it proofread, and the last thing you want to do is look at a picture, and especially because this is technical images, right? So it's a picture of a dashboard. So how many words can you write to say this is the Vonage dashboard? Well, AI, hey, can you write a really descriptive, caption or alt text? And it's oh yeah, I'll write. Do you want 100 words, 200 words, 300 words? So it's been really nice to see us doing best practices where for humans we're kind of lazy sometimes to get that last mile.
Absolutely.
And I would say the same a little bit with SEO, right? I know with some of the YouTube videos, we might go to AI to help us figure out tags and, keywords that we can use to, highlight our YouTube video in the algorithm. So, there's a million ways that I think AI has changed the day-to-day of a developer advocate. And to follow up to that question, where do you still prefer to do the work yourself instead of using AI?
Well, I have to say, I have never used AI to respond to an email. I don't know. I almost feel like I didn't think about it. But even thinking about it, I don't think I will. And I think it's usually because with emails, I try to be really terse, and so it doesn't feel like it's going to be a big benefit to me. But
There's a prompt for that.
Yeah, I feel like with AI taking over everything, as I'm sure this is probably the 5th video about AI you've watched today.
yeah,
In our company, like a lot of companies, we have like employee recognition software called Applause, where we can send nice notes like say, "Hey Jeremy, that was a really great video you did," and so they've stuck AI inside where.
I didn't know that.
Oh,
That's
you didn't
interesting.
know?
No.
And you can just, it's like, instead of writing, "Hey, you did such a good job," it'll say, like, "Do you want help with the AI to edit it or to, make it sound better or whatever?" And yeah, a lot of times whenever, even if it's not through the applause system, it's just writing a Slack message to somebody and saying, like, "Happy birthday" or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, there was a time when I was like, "Oh, maybe I could use AI to make it sound better," and then I was just like, "But then what's the point? What's the whole point of all of this?"
That reminds me of the day I realized that whenever I get a happy birthday wish on LinkedIn or something, that some people just have scripts that send those out. In fact, I think everybody does, and it just ruined it for me.
Yeah. For myself, I will say it's pretty easy. Where I don't use AI is when it's maybe a final message to leadership or executives. I'm especially very careful when it automatically comes up with things like how many visitors reach the site, maybe compared to other companies, the data that's being reported on may be coming from the company that's maybe reporting higher data than normal. So there's a few little things just like that I just kind of back out of.
Yeah. For video specifically, there's a lot of tools that have come out with AI for interaction design or like animations that we can add to the videos. And I feel like they're still not there yet. So that's something I still like to do myself. Like I'd rather add keyframes everywhere. With that said, like I think we're almost there. Maybe like give it a couple years.
I was gonna say with the visual stuff.
Yeah.
Until very recently, I also anytime if I was trying to do create a new app or do some small coding project or whatever. There's been AI design tools for quite a while, but I really didn't. It just never really felt right.
Yeah.
Claude Design, I tried it recently for the first time. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's really wild what you can do now with just like give it a very brief. So I don't know. I guess the answer is give it a few more weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Give it a few more weeks.
By the end of the year for sure. I think we'll be
Yeah.
there, but definitely something I do prefer to do myself right now. Cool. So with that said, what is something you wish AI was better at right now?
Well, maybe I could start, but we've all had like the OpenClaw or all the various names that they've had for it, and maybe this one's not one that I wish AI could start doing, but I wish that I could reliably trust it with my file system. So right now we know we're all kind of in this weird world where if you do want to run something like that, typically folks are doing one or two things. They're either buying Mac Minis, finding an old Windows PC, or maybe using things like a Perplexity computer, which lets you basically have a Mac Mini in the cloud. And with all of that, it's all great and everything, but I would love to be able to let it just have access to my file system and do things like manage it, sort it without any sort of, scaredness of, that's not a word, but being afraid of things such as it deleting a number of files or maybe even exposing those files to the internet with obviously hacking. Folks have done, prompt engineering there where they're able, or prompt injection is the proper term, where they're injecting prompts and getting access to it. Maybe I wish there was maybe a bit more of the security layer that was attached to that.
Yeah, I guess mine would be along those lines of just like the scale of AI. It helps me one-on-one so much, and I want to scale that, even just scale it personally. And I feel like my migration from using the chat interface into using Claude Code, where I am basically giving it rights to a file system, just a very small file system, has been a big scale factor for me, because now I can say things like, across all these files, can you look for instances of this and just change them for me. And that's pretty big. I've also used it across my entire file system to say, can you look at this entire, say, my documents library, which at this point is really huge. And can you tell me what you think of my organizational structure? But I don't let it loose on it. I just ask it, give me some recommendations for how I might shift that to a better structure. But then using things like OpenClaw, I feel like I'm not gonna give it my computer. I'm gonna give it its own computer, right? And you can have your way with that. You're another agent. You're a little riskier than me. You're a lot more powerful than me. So you take that other computer, and I'll keep control of this one. Thank you very much.
So you don't want to give it access to your emails?
Not quite yet.
And do you guys think that is a problem that could be solved soon, or you think there's a bigger challenge?
Oh, we're on the
with that?
cusp.
We're on the
Yeah,
cusp,
yeah, we are. I mean, for a lot of people would answer that we're already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that the security aspect of it is starting to go away, especially, again, going back to like Perplexity Computer, where now you don't have to host that thing on your local file system. You don't have to go out and buy a Mac Mini, but you do have to pay the pretty high cost that it is to spin those up. And I believe it was something like 100 or 150. The cost is going to have to, just shift and drop down more. And I think that's going to happen.
Well, and I think one of the things that we are more on the cusp of, in other words, it's just a little bit fewer weeks out, is the migration to the models running on the edge, where really in my home network, I already want to have my, I don't want to use Perplexity Compute where even the computer is off in the cloud somewhere. I want it to be inside my firewall. And when the models are inside my firewall as well, then that changes the game quite a bit. So I think that's something that is yet to be refined.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Cool. So we spoke about how we use AI both personally and professionally, but we can also speak about how Vonage is using AI and some of the tools that we've built and might be building in the future. One of those, or a couple of those, are our MCP servers. We have our documentation MCP server as well as our tooling MCP server. And I would love to open it up to the group if anyone wants to speak about their experience with our MCP servers, any cool features you want to highlight, feel free to.
Yeah, so I've been playing with the MCP servers quite a bit.
You mean you've been doing a lot of the work for our team on it?
And I will say that when we first launched the documentation server, I was a little bit unsure why we needed a documentation server, because I thought, hey, these models are getting really powerful. Our docs are all online. They should just go out and find whatever they need. And I've seen it quite a few times where building out apps for tutorials or whatever, when I tell it specifically, like, make sure you check the docs first, and then I can see the tool being executed, then it actually is able to solve. Where it hallucinated, it just imagined, I don't know. A lot of times it's the data structure, right? Yeah. It's what the response that it's getting from the API. It imagines what it should look like because it's just using kind of maybe a more generic JavaScript response, and then it doesn't actually align with what it's getting from Vonage.
Yeah.
And especially where I'm trying to think of a specific example, but especially on like doing with mobile tutorials, where it has to transcribe that data into however it is in the app itself and align the properties, then pinging the documentation server has really helped debug where it would get caught. And I've tried that before where I would just upgrade, I don't know, instead of using Sonnet, I would use Opus at the time. And it would still get errors, but then when it switched over, it would fix itself. So that's pretty cool.
Now, I will say the key thing that I think that's so amazing about the MCP servers is that really we're allowing the developer to stay in their native environment all the time.
Yeah.
So obviously I love Visual Studio Code. That's the one I've got the most experience with. I'm not a full-time developer, or not really a real developer, but I will say that if I were one, I would believe that since I could do all of my code, I could sign in, I can do all of my building process, testing process, that little additional feature of being able to pull context out of documentation and present it back into my editor or my IDE, such as like Visual Studio, is absolutely key for being more productive as a developer.
Yeah, the MCP servers have been so incredibly valuable. I heard somebody talking about a tool that I won't mention what, but they came out with a new version. They said, hey, now we've got AI. So if you go to the website, there's a chatbot where you can type your request into this, this text field and it'll generate it for you. And the response was, are you serious? Like, I have to go to your website? Mm-hmm. If I have to go to your website, it's already dead on arrival, right? If it's not coming to me, to my tooling by way of an MCP server, then you've designed it wrong. And maybe it does, but.
Yeah. I had a similar experience as Benjamin with the documentation MCP server. At first, I was just like, why do we need this? Given that we have, very thorough documentation, but being able to just have that, to have easy access to it and know that what information we're getting is accurate, I think is a game changer, because as we spoke about, AI sometimes can be wrong, but when that source of truth is right and is embedded in your IDE, it just makes things a million times easier.
And like you say, it gives you this confidence boost whenever you see that it's going to the tooling, because then you know that it's going to get the latest, it's going to get the correct answer.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's just like that it... imagine the property name was different. It was like everything in the code might look great. And so the agent itself is looking at the code and it's like, oh, but this looks right.
Yeah.
Or maybe that the data is, at index 0.
Yeah.
And it didn't know that there was an index 0, something like that.
Or it created it based on examples that it found online or in its training that are just old. We don't use that schema anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so we spoke a little bit about the documentation MCP server, but as we mentioned, we also have a tooling MCP server. So I would love to hear your opinions on that as well, if you guys had any experience. Well, I know you guys had experience working with it, but maybe if you want to talk about your favorite features with the tooling MCP server, I think that would be useful for our audience.
One thing about it is, we talked about OpenClaw and giving an agent your computer and the ability to do all kinds of things. And the documentation MCP server kind of gives the agent a good source of knowledge. I think usually I benefit from the documentation server where I'm asking questions and it's using the documentation MCP server to give me the right answer. But the tooling is like what gives it the power. And so if I'm setting up another computer with OpenClaw and saying, go do all these things, well, now it can send text messages on my behalf, or it can send whatever on my behalf. So that's where it is positioned.
Yeah. So not to spoiler alert, but we are coming out with a full productized MCP server. And so the tooling server that we have right now is very much geared towards developers who want to get their hands dirty, don't mind setting up MCP server and handling all the authentication that they have to do on their own. The cool thing is that it's open source, so you can, if there's a tool that's not there that you want to see, you can just go to the GitHub, open a pull request, and we'll add it in. So that's really cool. One of the tools that was recently added, which is pretty powerful, is that there's a reports API tool. So if you want to, instead of having to go to a dashboard or remember, or if you want to see, what's going on with your Vonage API usage, you can just wire up that MCP server in whatever agent that you're using and just keep a tab open, which is kind of cool. And just have, your reports tab, and then you can have all that information always right inside of your agent, never have to think about where to find it inside of Vonage. So if that's, if you're using SMS or calls or whatever, you can see like how much usage you're getting out at all times, and just set it up one time and it'll always be there.
Nice.
Yeah, and what I think would be really cool with that, even though I haven't done it, would be to have maybe a custom dashboard that it may tell things like how much you have spent on a certain API calls for the month. Other things that ties into you can set up team members and see, are all of these team members still using it? Is there folks that we could maybe eliminate from the group, just to make it a more tighter control of it. But then again, going back to Benjamin's point, everything open source. We have a great GitHub, and on that GitHub, not just some of these MCP related things, but all of our SDKs are open sourced, where if somebody from the community wants to see some of the inner workings, or maybe there's an error message that pops up and they're not exactly sure how that happens, you can literally go right into the source code, or of course you could call our 24/7 support.
Exactly. Cool. Well, thank you guys for having this chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to know what you'd like to see from Vonage, especially if you have any ideas for any new AI features. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so let us know in the comments. To hear more from us, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, and also check out our blog at developer.vonage.com. And we're also going to be starting office hours very soon, so make sure you keep a lookout for that as well. And all that information will be in the description. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.